regular April meeting of the Charter Commission is called to order, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Abbott.
Present.
Commissioner Cohen is absent. Commissioner Ginder.
Present.
Garcia.
Present.
Gerard Isaacson.
Present.
Kozak. Commissioner Kozak is absent. Lickness.
Present.
Metke. Commissioner Metke is absent. Commissioner Newborn. Commissioner Newborn is absent. Commissioner Perry.
Here.
Commissioner Rubenstein.
Present.
Commissioner Sandberg.
Present.
Commissioner Schwarzkopf. Commissioner Schwarzkopf. I haven't seen him sign in. Absent. Commissioner Smith.
Present.
Chair Clegg.
Here.
There are 10 members present, Mr. Chair.
That constitutes a quorum. The next item is the consideration of the agenda, which was online and also emailed out to everyone yesterday. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Barb Lickner.
Greg Abbott, second.
It's been moved and seconded. Do we need a roll call vote for this, Casey?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do.
All in favor, we will conduct a roll call vote.
Thank you. Commissioner Abbott.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginder.
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia.
Aye.
Commissioner Gerard Isaacson.
Aye.
Commissioner Kozak. Commissioner Lickness.
Aye.
Commissioner Metke. Commissioner Newborn.
I'm here,
Commissioner-
but I'm here, but
Commis-
I'm not sure what we're voting on.
We're voting on adoption of the agenda.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Perry.
Aye.
Commissioner Rubenstein.
Aye.
Commissioner Sandberg.
Aye.
Commissioner Schwarzkopf.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Chair Clegg.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
So you will note that Commissioner Newborn and Commissioner Schwarzkopf have joined us. The next item is consideration and approval of the March minutes. They, again, were attached to the package on LIMS and attached to the email you received yesterday. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved. Andrea
Second.
Rubenstein.
Schwarzkopf.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Abbott.
Aye.
Commissioner Ginder.
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia.
Abstain. I was absent.
Gerard Isaacson.
Abstain. I was absent.
Kozak.
Here.
Commissioner Lickness.
Yay or AI or whatever I'm supposed to say.
Commissioner Metke. Commissioner Newborn.
Aye.
Commissioner Perry.
Aye.
Commissioner Rubenstein.
Abstain. I was absent.
Commissioner Sandberg.
Abstain, I was absent.
Commissioner Schwarzkopf.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Chair Clegg.
Aye.
There are 9 ayes and 4 abstentions.
That item passes. The next item is the chair's report. And the only thing that I have to report is to do with the committee structure, which we're going to get to later. Last time we talked, we approved the formation of 2 committees in connection with redistricting. One would be the Rules Committee and the other was the Outreach and Education Committee. After the meeting, we had about 10 people sign up for the Rules Committee and 0 people sign up for the Outreach and Education Committee. I also think we ought to have an advisory group committee, as we did the last time around, which would basically deal with recruitment, interviewing, and selection of the advisory group as provided in the charter. So what I'm going to suggest we do today, and maybe everyone can think about this as we go through the meeting, is I would like to have every commissioner serve on at least one committee. So be thinking of what your preferences are, and if everyone picks rules, then be thinking about what your second and third choice are, because I'm going to make some assignments so we have a good representation on all of these committees. So we'll get to that later, but
Chair Clegg, I would like to be on the Outreach and Education Committee.
all right, that's great. We'll get to that.
And on
When
that
it's on-
other thing you talked about. that
When it's
federal
on-
task force.
When it's on the agenda, which is items
Okay,
8 and 9.
sorry.
But thank you.
Okay.
The next item is the public hearing on the potential charter amendment for special municipal elections. We set this public hearing at our last meeting, and as you recall, the need for this arises because of a state statute which limits municipal elections to, I believe it's 5 dates in a calendar year, which makes our special election process very problematic. And I'm going to I think this is the first public hearing that's been conducted over Skype. So I will turn it over to City Clerk Casey Carl for management.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excuse me, Chair Clegg and Casey. I believe Andy Kozak has called in and is available on the phone.
Commissioner Kozak, can you hear me? If you're on the phone, you'll need to press *6 to unmute yourself, Commissioner Kozak.
I was texting with him and he couldn't get his Skype to work, so I recognize his phone number in the participants. He ends in 0888.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I think I'm on now, Casey.
Thank you, Commissioner Kozak. I'm going to simply recommend, Mr. Chair, that we recognize Assistant City Attorney Carol Bashoon for a brief overview of the proposed charter amendment, just to set the stage for all commissioners and also for the public who have dialed in and are listening.
Very well, thank you. City Attorney Bashoon, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Clegg and members of the commission. I just want to give you some background about this issue and the reasons for the change to the charter. Currently, the charter provisions require that elections be held for the mayor or council members within 90 days of a vacancy. There is a statute, section 205.13, that requires special elections to be held in cities on only 5 specified days during the year. Those days are the second Tuesday in February, April, May, or August, or on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Section 205.13 of the Minnesota statutes also states that a home rule charter city cannot designate additional dates for a special election in its charter. And the law is effective for any elections that are held on January 1st, 2018 or after that date. Now, the reason for the changes, the proposed changes to the charter, are that with only 5 special election dates, the city doesn't have very much flexibility. And the city may not always be able to comply with the charter requirement to have an election within 90 days of a vacancy. Here's an example. If a vacancy were deemed to be today and effective today of, say, a council member ward office, the election would need to be held by June 30th, 90 days out within that time frame under our current charter provision. However, there are no election dates in June or July. So that would mean that the next election date would have to be the August date, the second Tuesday in August or August 11th. So we would not be able to meet the 90-day requirement. So the charter amendments that are proposed There's one to section 3.3A of the charter, and that relates to a special election for an elected office, either a mayor or council member. And it must be under the new charter, under the proposed charter provision on a legal election day, which would be one of those 5 days required by statute, and more than 90 days from the date of vacancy. Now, we use the term more than 90 days from the date of vacancy because there are a lot of different provisions under election law, and we have to follow those provisions, and there's a lot of timing provisions. For example, there's a specific timeline for when we can have the candidate filing, and we also have to give notice to the county auditor at least 74 days before a special election. So that's why that date is in there, but it does give flexibility that it has to be after 90 days. The other thing is 3.3B, that talks about the special election for any questions on the ballot. That would have to be in accordance with election law. In other words, if we're going to put a question on the ballot, it has to be done on one of those 5 election days. 4.2D basically deals with council member vacancies, and similar to 3.3A, it states that a special election for a council member must be on one of those 5 statutory dates and more than 90 days from the date of vacancy. 7.1D is similar to that in that it's for the mayor. So if we have a special election for the mayor, it must be on one of those 5 election days and more than 90 days from the date of the vacancy for that mayoral position. So that's just an overview of the proposed charter provisions that we're considering today during this public hearing. If there are any questions, I could answer those.
I have a question.
Mr. Chair, just to break in a bit, it seems that in the queue there are 2 commissioners signaling for recognition. First is Commissioner Perry, followed by Commissioner Ginder. Commissioner Perry, why don't you go ahead?
Commissioner Perry, I just assumed that you were either moving approval of minutes or agenda or seconding, but.
That's correct, so you can ignore me.
My apologies.
Commissioner Ginder.
My question for Ms. Bashoon on section 3.3 is the way it's set up right now, there's no really time limit on when that election has to be held other than 90 days from the date of the vacancy. Why isn't the special election must be held on the first legal election day after 90 days of the date of the vacancy? That kind of seems to me pins it down to the first day after the election or after the vacancy, as opposed to just leaving it for any date that comes after that.
Chair Clegg, Chair Ginder, and members of the commission, that gives us a little bit more flexibility. The reason being is there are, like I said, there are certain timelines that we have to meet. For example, if we have to have candidate filing within a period of 70 to 84 days before the election, so that's putting us out 84 days before the election. And then on top of that, we have to give a 14-day published notice of the filing period. So now we're looking at 84 days plus 14 days, that is 98 days. We may not be able to do the election at the next available date out of those 5 dates. We may have to defer to the date after that because we would have to meet all the statutory requirements for all the filing periods.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions by commissioners? Hearing none, we will begin the public hearing. Casey, would you like to lead us in this?
Yes, Chair Clegg, thank you. What we'll do is we will open up the virtual meeting now to public comments as part of the hearing. We'll be identifying speakers by the last 4 digits of the phone number that's entered into our speaker queue. So when I call the 4-digit number, we will invite you to press *6 on your phone keyboard in order to deactivate the mute feature that is activated right now. After you unmute your phone pressing *6, we will ask you to please state your name for the record and then proceed to your comments. If you are in queue and you decide you do not wish to comment, simply keep your phone muted. I will call that individual number a second time, and after the second time, if there's no response, we will move on to the next caller in queue. So with that, we will begin to take up the caller queue that we have in the attendees. Again, we'll call the number by the last 4 digits twice. The first time, if you wish to speak, please press *6 to unmute your phone, give your name for the record, and proceed. If you don't wish to comment, I'll call it a second time, and then we'll move on. I'll begin with the caller whose extension ends in the 4 digits 8874. Caller, if you wish to comment, please press *6 to unmute yourself. This is for caller whose phone extension ends in the digits 8874. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next caller in queue. That one is a phone extension that ends in the digits 2530. This is for the phone number that ends in the 4 digits 2530. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next caller in queue. This is a phone number that ends in the 4 digits 0488. This is the third caller in queue. The last 4 digits of the phone number are 0488. Moving on, we'll take up caller with the phone number ending with the 4 digits 4093. If you wish to make comment, please press *6. This is the caller whose phone extension ends in 4093. Hearing none, we'll move on. The next extension is 7851. Caller whose phone number ends in the 4 digits 7851. If you wish to comment, please press *6. Moving on, we'll go to the next caller whose phone ends in the 4-digit extension 4720. I'm going to go back one time to 1142. It looks like the speaker has turned on. This is the caller whose number ends in 1142. Are you there, caller? Nope. I'm going to move on to the next caller whose phone ends in the numbers 0888, which is one of our council commissioners. So I'm going to move on to the next one. The next line is 7204. This is a caller whose phone ends in the 4 digits 7204. No comments. The next one is a phone that ends in the 4 digits 2149. If you wish to make comments, please press *6. Caller ending 2149. Moving on, the next caller is a number that ends 6101. Caller whose phone ends in the 4 digits 6101. Okay, the next caller is the phone ending in the 4 digits 6111. If you wish to speak, please press *6. Caller whose phone ends in the 4 digits 6111. Not hearing any, I'll proceed to the next caller. This is a caller whose phone ends in the 4 digits 2177. Caller whose phone ends in the 4 digits 2177. Caller whose phone ends in the 4 digits 9035. 9035. All right. Caller whose phone ends in the 4-digit extension 8597. Caller whose phone ends 8597. Moving on. Caller whose number ends in the extension 3464. Caller ending in 3464. Caller whose phone ends in the extension 6691. If you wish to speak, please press *6. Caller whose phone extension ends in the 4 digits 6691. The final entrance we have is from Liz Navratil. Liz, if you can hear me and you wish to speak in the public hearing, you can unmute your phone by pushing *6. One more time, I'll ask for Liz. And not seeing anyone. Mr. Chair, that completes the entire list of folks who have called in to monitor the meeting. We had no one wish to speak or no one activate their microphone indicating a wish to speak on this item in the hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. I'll give everyone just one more chance if anyone has anything to offer in the public hearing. Before we adjourn the public hearing, please unmute your phone and speak up now. Hearing nothing, the public hearing is adjourned. And I have a question for Mr. Carl. Obviously, everyone knows that Councilmember Warsame resigned the other day, and that this amendment, if proposed and approved, would not be adopted in time for the special election that is called for under our current charter. And state statute would control when the next election is held, correct?
Mr. Chair, you're correct. And so in conversation with Ms. Bashoon, who is the Assistant City Attorney assigned to the elections function, we have determined that the state statute controls over the charter, and therefore the special election would be called to run concurrently with the statewide primary on Tuesday, August 11th. We will be taking forward a request to the City Council at their meeting this Friday. Under the charter, the first action that triggers this is the resignation submitted by the council member, which was submitted on Monday this week, March 30th. The next series of actions is that the City Council must find and declare there is a vacancy in the seat. And then once they do that, to set the terms and the timeline for the special election, and then to also set by ordinance the dates for the filing period for candidates in that election. So we anticipate bringing that series of actions to the City Council this Friday, if approved, concurrent with the law that Ms. Bashoon mentioned about special dates for special elections. The election for the special election to fill the unexpired term in Ward 6 would occur on Tuesday, August 11th.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Carl? Commissioner Abbott, did you have a question?
Yeah, I don't know if this qualifies a question, but I think the under the unique teleconferencing situation we have here, I'm a little concerned that we're not getting the feedback in terms of the public hearing that we should be getting. And I don't know if I should make a motion here or if it's something we need to address at the end of the meeting. But would it be possible to open up public comment to these amendments via email, regular mail for the next 2 or 3 weeks before we close, this public feedback process? Perhaps Mr. Carl can answer that question.
Mr. Chair, if you'd like me to take an initial stab at that, and I'll certainly invite our attorney, Ms. Bashoon, to weigh in. The item that is under discussion related, and this is number 7 on your agenda, which is also a proposed charter amendment. There are somewhat companion items, and number 7, if necessary, these could be submitted to the ballot. There is still time yet to submit a ballot question, according to the timeline, to get questions submitted to the county for the November general election ballot. So I'm not concerned about the timeline at this point. We're very early in the process. So if it was the desire of the Charter Commission to leave open a comment period, I would suggest we would then extend that comment period. I certainly would be able to, at the Charter Commission's direction, offer an opportunity for email or written comments to be submitted, and can share those as they are received with the Charter Commission. And at the next regular meeting in May, those comments could be reviewed and considered as part of the record. I leave that to you, Mr. Chair, to make the decision on what direction you would like to facilitate that conversation amongst your members.
Thank you. And that will be up to the body to decide. And I would suggest that this amendment dealing with election days and the amendment under item 7 dealing essentially with the con law and how we're going to deal with that could perhaps be treated differently, in that I think this amendment dealing with special municipal election days could very likely be an amendment by ordinance and approved by the council, because we're basically conforming to a law that the state thrust upon us and complying with that law, as opposed to the con law amendment, which there are several different ways the city could go, and we're basically proposing one way. So what I'm going to suggest at the conclusion of, well, I think the public hearing is concluded. What I'm going to suggest at the conclusion of this item is that we move this forward for consideration as an amendment by ordinance. And if that were to fail in some way, I think we would know by the time of the deadline for putting it on the ballot in November.
Mr. Chair, Greg Abbott here again. That's fine. I mean, I'm just concerned that we are, under these unique circumstances, we're kind of technologically limiting public comment, and I don't know if you want public comment for item number 5, if it's going to be a council amendment. I mean, I think regardless of the disposition of either 5 or 7, I think both are entitled to have public comment. And I would like, whether it's appropriate here or at some other point in the agenda, I would like to make a motion to open public comment via email or regular mail to be received by the city clerk, say by May 1st, and then be able to be reviewed for our next meeting.
All right, that's an appropriate motion to make now, if you wish to do so.
I do.
Is there a second to that motion? Or I see Commissioner Giroux Isaacson has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a note that we've probably had more people call in than we've had people actually at our meeting. So just want to make that note.
Good point. And I would also say that for many of our non-controversial amendments, we don't have public comment. So this is, while I recognize the unique circumstances of this meeting, this level of public comment is not unusual for us. Commissioner Sandberg, you have a comment.
I just wanted to say that I think that Commissioner Abbott's motion might delay moving it forward to the City Council for consideration as an ordinance. And I would think, though, that we could in fact say, I don't know what language to use, to say that if we're moving it forward, that certainly members of the public are solicited to send their comments to the City Council, which I assume they would do anyway. They would have to have a hearing, correct?
Correct. City Clerk Casey Carl, can you describe the council process if we move an amendment ahead for consideration by ordinance?
So the amendment by ordinance process, if it's initiated here at the Charter Commission, the hearing would be done by you, not by the council. The council can, of course, do an additional hearing if they so choose. The required hearing would be done by the Charter Commission. The other thing of note I would point out is the City Council recently restructured itself because of the declared state of local public health emergency. Under that restructuring, the council is now meeting in a 1-week cycle rather than 2. So City Council is meeting every Friday. So there are an increased number of opportunities for the City Council to receive and act on a proposal from the Charter Commission. So if it is the will of the body to proceed by ordinance, certainly there are adequate opportunities between now and mid-May for us to accommodate that action.
Mr. Carl, maybe I'm misremembering, but I thought that if we moved a proposed amendment forward for consideration for adoption by ordinance, the City Council had up to 30 days to put a date on it for a hearing forward. Is that correct?
They have a period of time, and I apologize, Mr. Chair, I don't have the rule book right in front of me. They do have a period of time in which they have to act to set the language for a ballot, or set the resolution in order to put together that ordinance, to pass it by ordinance. So separate from a ballot question, which I seem to be hooked onto, in terms of an ordinance, the subject matter is referred by this group to the council. The council goes through its normal ordinance process. Again, the ordinance process has been temporarily restructured under the local emergency declaration, such that the process for doing ordinances itself has been streamlined a bit. So again, there are, I think, multiple opportunities for us, this Charter Commission, to coordinate that action through the City Council if that is the desire of this body.
So there has been a motion to leave public comment open till May 1st by email or written submission to us through the clerk's office. But I didn't hear a second. Is there a second? I don't see any names popping up. And Mr. Carl, what I'm seeing in Minnesota statute section 410.12, under the section regarding amendments by ordinance, it's within 1 month of receiving the recommendation to amend the charter by ordinance, the city must publish a notice of a public hearing on the proposal, and the notice must contain the text of the proposed amendment. The City Council must hold the public hearing on the proposed charter amendment at least 2 weeks, and not more than 1 month after the notice is published. So it looks to me like another public hearing would be required.
You're reading the statute under subdivision 7, Mr. Chair?
Yes, I am.
Yep. I'm just pulling it up as you're reading it. I would concur.
So if this motion is not adopted, there would still be a chance for input at a council hearing. I still haven't heard a second, and I'm looking at the conversation board. If there is not a second, the motion will not be considered. There is no second, so the motion is not considered. Is there a motion that we should move this forward for consideration by the council for an amendment by ordinance?
Make the motion, Mr. Chair, Schwarzkopf.
Schwarzkopf made the motion. I think I heard somebody else, but couldn't identify that person.
Seconds.
Sandberg seconds. Kozak also seconds. Is there any discussion? Looking on the conversation board, not seeing any discussion. If not, we will proceed to a roll call vote. This is a vote to move the proposed amendment ahead to the City Council for consideration of adoption by ordinance. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Abbott,
Aye.
Ginder,
Aye.
Garcia,
Aye.
Gerard Isaacson,
Aye.
Kozak,
Aye.
Lickness, Commissioner Lickness. You may need to press *6. I'll come back. Commissioner Metke, Commissioner Newborn,
Aye.
Commissioner Perry,
Aye.
Commissioner Rubenstein,
Aye.
Commissioner Sandberg,
Aye.
Commissioner Schwarzkopf,
Aye.
Commissioner Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Lickness. One last time, Commissioner Lickness. Chair Clegg.
Aye.
There are 12 ayes.
That motion carries. Mr. Carl, could your office forward a transmission letter to me for executions that I can then submit to your office?
We'll do that, absolutely.
Thank you. Any more for item 5? Not seeing anything, we'll move on to item 6, which is the 2020 Charter Commission calendar, which was attached to your agenda. The only thing I would note is that it still had the April date as being on April 8th as opposed to April 1st.
An error, obviously, on our part, Mr. Chair. I apologize.
No worries, we'll just fix it.
And then I guess the other issue is to note here that during the declared state of local public health emergency, the Charter Commission finds that it is impractical or imprudent for the public to gather in person for these meetings, and we will hereafter be conducting those meetings by electronic or telephone means until further notice to the public, and my office will issue that notice on behalf of the Charter Commission.
So we will need to vote on both of those items, both the calendar and that electronic meeting.
Yes, please.
Is that correct? Can I have a motion to that effect, that we agree to the calendar and we agree to conduct meetings remotely and electronically?
So moved.
Who was that?
I think that was Commissioner Schwarzkopf.
It was Commissioner Abbott.
Abbott.
Commissioner Abbott, and looks like Commissioner Perry.
Chair Clegg, can you hear me now?
I can now, yes.
Okay, I called back in because I don't know what happened. Sorry.
All right, it's been moved and seconded, the calendar and the electronic conduct of meetings. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Abbott.
Aye.
Ginder.
Aye.
Garcia.
Aye.
Gerard Isaacson.
Aye.
Kozak.
Aye.
Lickness.
Aye.
Metke. Newborn.
Aye.
Perry.
Aye.
Rubenstein.
Aye.
Sandberg.
Aye.
Schwarzkopf.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Chair Clegg.
Aye.
There are 13 ayes.
Very good. Moving along to item number 7. Item number 7 is the so-called con law amendment, which we heard about last time. We had a public hearing at our last meeting. Last time was also the first meeting at which we saw the proposed amendment in detail, saw the actual wording of the draft amendment. So we didn't adopt it. We wanted to give everyone a chance to consider the wording. So I'll just ask right now if anyone has a question or a proposed change or anything else to do with the wording of that amendment. I think it's still too early for us to move that forward, since I think this is one that's going to have to go on the ballot. but I would like to give everyone the opportunity to have as much input as possible before final consideration. Anyone? Commissioner Perry, did I see your?
Yes, I have quite a procedural question. If we change the language, do we need to have another public hearing?
I'll defer to City Attorney Bashoon, but I think
Chair Clegg, members of the commission, I am actually not sure. I'd have to look into that and let you know. I can't give you the answer right now.
And Mr. Chair, this is Casey. As she looks at that, and I don't have it in front of me either, my recollection is that as the sum and substance of the proposal does not change significantly, we're within the public hearing, the scope of notice that was conducted for that hearing. If there's substantial change from what was done with the hearing, we would probably be advised by counsel, which Ms. Bashoon will come back and tell us, to open another hearing. And as you noted, there's still time on the clock for us to take that under consideration.
Hello?
Chair Clegg, I think you might be on mute.
I just hung up and called back in.
I think there might be some technical issues that the chair is experiencing, and I think he may have just joined me. Chair Clegg, can you hear us? You might need to disengage and then rejoin the meeting on that Skype link. Apologies for that. Commissioners, while we're waiting, I believe Chair Clegg is experiencing some technical difficulties, and our crew is reaching out to help him. I would only reiterate the small last portion of my comment as we're waiting about the timeline. The timeline for submission of a ballot question, which would be related to item number 7 currently under discussion. If we were to submit that to the ballot, it has to be submitted to the county no less than 17 weeks before the general election. So within the timeline that is still open to us, because this came forward early enough, we would have enough time to bring this forward at the next meeting. I know that Attorney Bashoon will be researching the question about scope of the notice and the public hearing issue for an answer, and we can certainly provide that before the next regular meeting. But there is enough time for the Charter Commission to continue to consider this issue, and if there are amendments, to come forward to make those.
Casey?
Yes.
Jan Sandberg. I wasn't sure if anybody's monitoring the queue thing. This is not a public hearing today, correct? It's a discussion item.
Correct. It's a discussion item, and as the chair was just getting around to mentioning this, I believe Commissioner Sandberg, that the issue was that discussion today was the pleasure of the Charter Commission, what direction we might take. I believe he wanted to get input from the Charter Commissioners in terms of the direction and the next steps, the scope and language that was included in the draft. So I
letting me talk.
Oh,
it says my microphone is unmuted.
You are unmuted, Mr. Clegg. You are back.
Oh, I am unmuted now. Thank you.
Thank you for returning. I was just explaining the timeline. It's back to you.
I just wanted to weigh in on the question that was asked about would we need to hold a public hearing if we changed a word or if we changed some language? And I believe the answer to that question is if we inserted a not or a word like that that changed the meaning of the amendment, then we would have to hold another public hearing. But if we made minor changes, we would not.
Mr. Chair, that was what I was also saying in your absence, that was my opinion, but I was deferring to the city attorney. That was my recollection from prior amendments that have been done by this group to which I had been privy. Also, I guess the question was before the technical difficulties kicked you out of queue, the action you were anticipating the body taking today.
Uh-oh. Roll, Rocky.
Want another month to review wording and ask questions, I think that's fine. Did that get through?
I believe part of that message got through, Mr. Clegg. The chair was saying that if it's the body's pleasure, we could continue consideration to the next regular meeting, which is scheduled for May 6th. Is that correct, Chair Clegg?
That is correct. If there's a technical problem with my computer audio, I can call in with a phone.
Mr. Chair, I can't answer that definitively. We're not sure on this end what the technical issue might be.
All right.
We can hear you for now.
Good. So I think that concludes item 7, not an action item. The next 2 items are both with committees. As I said, last month we established, or we agreed to establish, the Rules Committee and the Outreach and Education Committee. We normally solicit participation in committees by whoever wants to join. It turns out that everybody wanted to join the Rules Committee. So what I think I would like to do is ask all of you to reply to me by email. And I would ask that Commissioners Kozak, Lickness, Rubenstein, and Schwarzkopf mute your phones because we can hear some feedback. But if your phones could please be muted, that would be great. But I would also like to establish a third committee that would be the Advisory Group Committee, and then ask all of you to submit by email to me your preference as to which committee you want to be on in rank order, 1, 2, and 3, and I will then appoint the committees. I think it's important that every commissioner serve on at least one committee. If you want to serve on 2 or 3, that's great, but serve on at least one committee, and I will then submit the rosters at our next meeting. And I will identify the chairs before that time as well so they can notice the first meeting. Does that sound like a plan?
Works for me.
Does that require a motion?
I don't believe it does. The chair appoints committees. I mean, normally we've self-appointed because there hasn't been as much interest as there is in a redistricting setting. But this would just be following our rules. I'm just asking for your preferences. Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you, Chair Clegg. Can you repeat what the role of the advisory committee would be?
As you will recall, the Charter Commission appoints an advisory group of non-charter commissioners to assist the Charter Commission in the redistricting process. I believe it is up to 9 members. And this group would be responsible for designing the process, for conducting the selection process, and making a recommendation to the full Charter Commission of who those advisory group members would be. Any other questions? Again, I think this is just consistent with our rules. It's a little bit out of the ordinary because I'm asking you to rank your preferences, but please do so and get back to me. And if you don't get back to me, I will assume that you still are willing to be on a committee and will appoint you as needed. There's nothing else there. We'll move on, and the next item is public comment. Is there any public comment at this time? And if you're calling in by phone, I believe you need to hit *6 if you want to public comment. This would be the time. Anybody can public comment, just *6. Hearing nothing, I think that concludes the business of the meeting. I would thank everybody for their willingness to participate remotely, and I think this was a successful experiment. And I leave it to your imagination to determine whether or not I am enjoying a quarantine as we speak.
Thank you,
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, without a motion, I think it'd be easier if you could just say that with no further business, we're adjourned, and we'll declare the meeting adjourned at 4:54. I would like to add, on behalf of the city staff who have helped with this meeting as well, our thanks to all of you for our first virtual public hearing.
Thank you. With no further business before us and with no further motions, we are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.